Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Welcome to the January Blahs. The magic of the holiday season has evaporated. Christmas lights have long turned off, and we're into a new year. But instead of feeling refreshed or ready to tackle something new, all you want to do is stay inside, bundle under a blanket, and hibernate. It's not an uncommon feeling. My social media is full of memes about a never-ending month filled with snow, calling January the Monday of months, proclaiming it has 203 days instead of 31, and characters exclaiming, "What a long year." And it's only January. There's so much more winter to come. So how do we make the most of what could be the gloomiest part of the year? I'm Kaitlin Lee, and today on The Big Story, I'm talking to Kari Leibowitz, psychologist and author of How to Winter: Harness Your Mindset to Thrive on Cold, Dark, or Difficult Days. And today, we're going to discuss just that and then some. Kari, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So we're in that part of winter now. You know, the holidays are over. Everyone's getting back to work. This is really the time of year that seasonal affective disorder starts to set in. Tell us what that is, how our bodies are affected by that.
Yeah, so seasonal affective disorder is a subtype of clinical depression. And I think that this is a little bit often misunderstood because I think people think that winter depression is like depression light. But the truth is, first, you would have to meet the diagnosis for clinical depression before you could be diagnosed with the recurrent seasonal pattern that indicates winter depression. So does your depression come on every winter, and does it go away or remit in the spring or summer? So for a lot of people, it comes on in the fall as the days are getting shorter, particularly around the end of daylight saving time. But in January and February after the holidays is also when a lot of people experience an uptick in what we might call the winter blues, of just feeling maybe you don't have clinical seasonal affective disorder, but you feel kind of gloomy, down, tired, not motivated. And I think even people who tend to really enjoy the holiday season, once we get to January or February, they're like, that's it. I'm over winter. I'm ready to move on.
So your work as a psychologist, you use something called mindset leveraging science. And from what I understand, we're like kind of rewiring our brains, shifting our perspectives. Tell us what that is and how we can kind of adapt that in our lives.
Sure. So, we all have mindsets about lots of different things. Mindsets are basically the lenses or frames through which we see the world. They're the core assumptions we have about things and how they work, right? So is stress helpful for our health, performance, and well-being, or harmful for our health, performance, and well-being? Is our intelligence something about us that's fixed and set, like our height or our eye color? Or is it something that we can grow with effort and work? Is winter a limiting, dreadful time of year that's inherently depressing, or a wonderful, special time of year full of opportunities? And mindsets help us make meaning of an ambiguous world. So all of these things, stress, our intelligence, winter, they're complicated, right? They all have, things about them that are good, things about them that are bad. Winter is objectively cold, dark, can be wet. But what is the meaning of that cold, dark, and wet on our health, on our mental well-being, on our motivation? That is often influenced by our mindsets, which is going to orient us to whether the cold is, for example, refreshing and rejuvenating, or frigid and uncomfortable, whether the darkness is cozy and magical or gloomy and depressing. And so our mindsets help us make sense of the world around us. And as a psychologist, I really study and try to help people use mindsets adaptively, use mindsets to improve their health and well-being and their experience in winter, but also in other domains of life.
So I guess, what are some of the things we can take, practical things we can do to kind of change our mindset?
Right. So first, notice that you have a mindset. So I grew up in a beach town in the U.S. at the Jersey Shore, south of New York City. And I grew up in this very summer-centric culture that really taught me that winter was a depressing time of year. And it wasn't until I moved to northern Norway, to the Arctic city of Tromsø, where I actually started interrogating this and realized that, oh, the idea of winter being depressing isn't a scientific fact or necessary biological reality. That's actually one interpretation of a season that has many things that may be challenging, but also many special opportunities. So first, you can notice, what's your mindset about winter, right? When you wake up on a gray, cold day in late January, are you immediately thinking, ugh, like, I'm so sick of this weather. I can't feel good when it's like this outside. I'm so miserable and uncomfortable. Or are you able to say, oh, this is a great day to bring my thermos of tea with me to work. It's a great day to be inside, either answering emails or working or in the classroom if you're a student, or a great day to do a special activity, make a cozy dinner with my family, have friends over for a movie night. So you can start trying to notice your mindset and orient it towards the parts of the season that you enjoy, that you find special, and then really try to take advantage of those things by doing things in the winter that are special to the season, that feel good to you.
And I know in January, we tend to, make New Year's resolutions and try to completely transform our lives. Is that maybe something we should take it slower and not try to tackle everything all at once? Is that something we should be doing?
I think it depends on who you are. I think winter is a really good time to get in touch with your inner world and ask yourself, what do I need more of right now? Right? So the darkness, the winter, it can be a very contemplative time of year. If you look at the natural world, almost every other thing on earth, plant or animal, changes its behavior and slows down in the winter. So you can start asking yourself, what do I need to feel good at this time of year? So for some people, that might be, oh, I need these resolutions, right? I feel like I need to move my body more. So I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to take a dance class. Or, I know that I tend to feel lonely and isolated at this time of year. So I'm going to, have friends over for dinner every Sunday night, or join a book club, or take a pottery class, or whatever it is. But other people might feel like, actually, I'm burnt out from the holidays. I was go, go, go for most of the year. The vacation that I took in December that was supposed to rejuvenate me, I spent running around with my family and doing all sorts of stuff, making holiday magic. And so what I need at this time of year is more stillness and slowness. And so what can I clear out and make space for, so that I can read more books and take more baths and do more yoga and just not feel so rushed? So I think it's not necessarily a problem to set goals that we want to achieve at this time of year, but this idea that, oh, I'm going to be my most productive self in January, or crush it at the gym, or, crush it at work, might actually be out of line with what we need most during this dark, cold time of the year.
So if I'm one of these people that, I decide I need to take it slow, I need to, maybe hibernate a little bit for the winter. How important, though, is it to still be getting outside? And I know in your book you mentioned when you moved to Tromsø, you moved your bed so you could see outside. So is that an important thing to be, I guess, in touch with nature, even though it's cold?
Yeah, I think in cultures that I've studied all over the world, from Scandinavia to Japan to the coast of Scotland, it seems like people who really enjoy winter find a way to get outside in all weather. And I do think that that's a really important aspect of the season. And it's where our approach to winter requires a little bit of nuance, because sometimes we have to give ourselves the permission to slow down and spend a day indoors. But sometimes we have to sort of dig deep and find the motivation to bundle up, layer appropriately, and get outside. So in Norway, they have this expression, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. And so there's this idea that the weather is not a good reason to stay indoors. And so when you bundle up, when you layer properly so that you can be warm and dry, even if it's cold or rainy, then you can start experimenting with spending time outside and how pleasurable it feels to be outside in bad weather. So this is something that I challenge my students to do in my courses, or participants to do in my workshops. And almost universally, people don't want to do this. People don't want to go out in the winter. They don't want to go for a walk. They don't want to go on an adventure. But if they're able to motivate themselves, they're often surprised at the mood boost it provides and how easy it can be to feel good outside in the winter, because we know that movement, fresh air, and connection with nature are all natural antidepressants. So especially if you're feeling down at this time of year, finding a way to get outside, even if it's just for 10 or 20 minutes, even if you just drink your morning coffee outside and smell the fresh air for a little bit before you start your workday, that's really going to have a huge impact on your mood.
Were there any other things that you learned when living in Norway from the people who lived there of how they really made the most of winter?
So one thing you'll see throughout Scandinavia is a really intentional use of lighting in winter. So there's a lot of candles and a lot of lamps or soft lighting. And I thought that this was just sort of an aesthetic preference. But what I've realized in learning about this is that it is actually a really profound thing, because when you turn all the lights on, all the overhead lights in your house, what you're doing is you're trying to banish the darkness. You're pushing away the dark. And that also creates a really strong contrast between the bright light of indoors and the darkness outside. So it makes the outside look darker, gloomier, grayer, which can also have the effect of making it harder to get outside. But when you use low lights, candles, twinkly lights, lamps, what you're actually doing is working with the darkness. You're inviting it into your home to create this sort of romantic, cozy feeling. And this idea of coziness is really important in Scandinavia. So you might have heard, the Danish word hygge, which is a big craze. In Norwegian, the word is kuslig, which means cozy. But it's this special feeling that is really enabled by the cold and the darkness that people revel in. And so what I have found is when you light a candle at sunset and turn the lights low, it sounds like this cliche, fluffy thing, right? Like, oh, light a candle and you won't be depressed in the winter. But when you do it with this mindful intentionality of welcoming the darkness, it really transforms the evening early sunsets from something that many people struggle with into this opportunity for this cozy, romantic, intimate feeling that we can get in winter.
I can really relate to that because I often say, like, I don't want the big light on in my house.
Big light
right?
off.
No big lights.
No big lights.
And often, like, during, I also say, like, I like the beginning of winter more than the end of winter because, Christmas, we have all of these twinkly lights and pretty lights around, and then everyone takes them down. And that's when kind of the seasonal depression or the winter blues settle in. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
It's so sad to me when people take their Christmas lights down. So in Edmonton, they've launched a campaign to really turn Edmonton into a winter city. And they've done this amazing job. They've created all these winter festivals and built new infrastructure so that people can get outside in the winter. And another thing they've done is they've tried to rebrand Christmas lights as winter lights and encourage people to leave them up for longer. So maybe you take your Christmas or your holiday decorations down, but you leave the lights up until February or even March so that you can have that sort of cozy glow for a little bit longer, because I think it makes a big difference.
I would not mind that. I would not mind some twinkly lights. I've always been fascinated by places that experience polar night. And I've always, I guess, to me, it seems like that kind of people who are experiencing polar night are living kind of a slower life. I don't know if is that something you experience, like the culture within Norway, Scandinavia? Is it a slower kind of way of day-to-day life, or are they doing similar things to us and they're just, coping with the with the darkness?
Well, I think the Norwegian culture generally has pretty good work-life balance. And so there is sort of a slowness, but I think people there still get stressed, still have lots of work responsibilities and childcare responsibilities and all of these things. But what happens when you live through the polar night, right, which is this time in the Arctic where the sun never rises above the horizon. So in Tromsø, the sun sets on November 21st and doesn't rise again until January 21st. And you go from these 2 months without direct sunlight in the winter to 2 months of 24-hour sunlight in the summer. You have the midnight sun period. And what I think that really does to a culture and a people is it makes it so obvious that you need to change your behavior with the seasons. When you're going from 24 hours of daylight in the summer to 24 hours without direct sun in the winter, it's obvious that you're going to slow down in the winter. It's obvious that you're going to sleep more, that you're going to eat differently, that you're going to socialize differently, that your motivation and energy are going to be affected. And I think that that's a really powerful idea because I think at lower latitudes, we have this idea as individuals and certainly culturally that it's important to maintain the same level year round, right? That we should be equally productive and energetic and social and effective all year round, and that we should have a really strict routine that we can stick to 365 days a year. But even if you don't live in the Arctic, there are huge variations in the amount of sunlight between summer and winter. I don't have the stats at hand, but I would imagine that in Toronto, there's at least a 10-hour difference in daylight in the winter versus the summer. And so that's obviously going to have an effect on our health and our well-being and our energy and the things we feel like doing. And so I think for me, the key in really looking at that slowness was really to notice how they were accepting of this idea that their energy and their behavior would change with the seasons. And I think that is the thing that you can take wherever you live to say it's okay to slow down in the winter. It's okay to feel more tired. And I know that there's another season for being more energetic.
And I know one of the things that was recommended to me for my mental health, because I work early mornings, is to always, if I can, look at the sunrise. So obviously in Canada, we're you're not experiencing polar night. So you probably have a chance to look at the sunrise, at least even if you're in an office, maybe look out the window at the sunrise. Is that something that maybe it could be a coping mechanism in your opinion?
Definitely. So we know that light influences our hormones. It influences things in our body like cortisol and melatonin. And that's why we often feel more tired in the winter, because light makes us feel alert and awake, and darkness makes us feel tired, which is, an evolutionary advantage so that we sleep when it's dark and we're up when it's light. But we know that morning light especially can help us wake up. So if you're getting up in the darkness, then having time where you can go and see the sunrise or be in the light, even if it's only for 10 or 15 minutes, makes a big difference. And this is something that I observed also in Tromsø, where, even during the polar night, they get a few hours of indirect light every day, what we would call civil twilight, right? So the sky is light the way that it is before the sun actually rises, even though the sun never fully comes up. And what I noticed was people going outside on their lunch break to be outside just for a few minutes in the brightest part of the day. So even if you do live somewhere in Canada that has the polar night, you can do that. But you could go wherever you live. If you're up, you can try to see the sunrise, or try to go outside in the middle of the day, in the brightest part of the day, for just a few minutes to experience that brightness and to notice the quality of the winter light and the winter sun, which is very different than summer sun, and I think has a beauty all its own.
So you did mention, people who have seasonal affective disorder, it's more serious than, say, the winter blues. You have to be diagnosed with depression. There are a lot of people who deal with depression, anxiety the whole year round, and maybe this time of year makes things a little worse for them. And they might be hearing this and they might be thinking, I'll go look at the sunset or the sunrise. That'll help. How can we, I guess, use these tips, but also, be mindful of, using them alongside, medication or therapy? Like, what would you say to these people who are like, I don't know about that?
Sure. So I think mindset is a really important tool in your toolkit, and it can be a really useful coping mechanism that can work interactively with other kinds of treatment, whether that's medication or talk therapy or group support or exercise therapy, whatever it is. I think working on your mindset has the potential to help that treatment be more effective. And there's a researcher at the University of Vermont, Dr. Kelly Rowan, who studies patients with seasonal affective disorder. And what she does is, rather than giving them light therapy, which is the most common treatment for seasonal affective disorder, where people sit in front of a sun lamp for 30 minutes every morning, she gives them cognitive behavioral therapy. And this cognitive behavioral therapy is what I would call a mindset intervention. So what she does in this treatment is she helps people examine their thoughts about the winter. So what are people's narratives that they're telling themselves about this time of year, and what they can and can't enjoy, or how they can or can't function? Are there ways to soften some of those unhelpful or negative narratives? Are there things that people can focus on doing this time of year that they enjoy? So maybe in the summer, you're a beachcomber and you love to go and walk by the water. And in the winter, you make it a point to do that for a little bit, even if you can't be out for as long. Or in the summer, you're a gardener and you love working with your hands. And so in the winter, you do knitting or you take a pottery class, something like that. And what she finds is that this treatment long term is actually more effective than light therapy for treating seasonal affective disorder, because 2 years after the end of treatment, patients who get this cognitive behavioral therapy and have sort of reframed their mindsets about winter are less likely to have seasonal depression. And I think the reason for that is, when you start rewriting some of these narratives about the season and how it affects you, it puts you on a different path that can be self-fulfilling, right? Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to bundle up and I'm going to go for a walk. And you go for a little walk and you come back and you have a mood boost. And then you realize, oh, that actually wasn't so bad. So maybe I could do that again in a couple of days. And then you do it more and more. And then that reinforces this idea that actually the winter is full of opportunity and I can enjoy myself outside in the winter. And then you're more motivated to do that. And so it becomes this sort of virtuous cycle where, by trying to change our mindset, it influences our motivation, which influences our behavior, which influences our well-being, which in turn strengthens that mindset. And so my goal is really not to give anyone something else to beat themselves up about or feel like, oh, here's another thing I'm failing at doing, but to give people a bunch of different strategies so people can try whatever feels good for them. If you feel called to go out for a walk, do that. Great. If you want to start with candle lights and twinkly lights and hot chocolate, do that. Find something that feels good. And hopefully, if it feels good, it will sort of perpetuate itself on its own.
Is diet also important when it comes to winter? Because obviously we're not getting the vitamin D that we usually get with lots of sunlight. Should people be eating certain foods to boost their mood?
So if you have a vitamin D deficiency, if you've gotten blood work done, certainly taking vitamin D in the winter can be very helpful. And that is something a lot of people do in northern Norway when they're not seeing the sun in the winter. I think eating seasonally is always good for us and always connects us to the earth in this way, right? So what are the things that are in season in the winter? We have things like root vegetables, potatoes and parsnips and beets and turnips. And those are vegetables that have spent the year growing underground, soaking up those nutrients of the earth that now stay good for a long time, that we can eat and get those nutrients. Also, citrus is in season in the winter. We need vitamin C that helps us stave off colds and flus and other illnesses. We crave rich, warming foods, nourishing soups and stews and breads. And I think not only is it healthy to eat these kinds of foods that are in season, but it also becomes this seasonal indulgence, right? This pleasure to say, oh, this is this special food that I only eat at this time of year that I really look forward to. I actually, at the time of this recording, have a bean and cabbage stew simmering on the stove. And
sounds great.
Yeah, it's not a very sexy dish, but it is so rich and warming and nourishing and with some
cozy.
Crusty bread and cozy, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to eat it in July when it's 30 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, blazing hot.
Exactly. I want to eat it in the winter. And so I think, you can get in tune with sort of your intuition, which will also bring you, I think, often in the direction of the things that we need at this time of year.
So we do have a lot of winter yet in Canada, especially. We have a lot of winter yet. What do you say to people who can't quite, taking all this information in, who can't quite see the light at the end of the tunnel yet?
Yeah, I think that the tail end of winter can be really hard. This time we're getting into now is what I call the winter doldrums, when, the shine of the holidays is behind us, but we still have a lot of winter left. So one thing I learned when I was in northern Scandinavia is I was in Inari in what is now Finland. And I went to the Sami museum there and spent a lot of time talking to people in the Sami community. So the Sami are the indigenous peoples of Northern Europe, what is now Norway, Finland, and Sweden. And the Sami traditionally have 8 seasons. So they have the 4 seasons you're probably familiar with: summer, spring, fall, and winter. And they have 4 bridge seasons. So they have spring, summer, summer, autumn, autumn, winter, and spring, winter. And so rather than being 1 season, winter is actually 3 seasons. It's autumn, winter, winter, and spring, winter. And some of the people I talked to there said that spring, winter especially is one that is still really used by people in the Sami community today, because I think it's such an important season to separate out. And it's really changed the way I look at winter. So, we might be in sort of deep winter until late January, mid-February, even late February, depending on where you live, right? It's really dark. It's really cold. That's really when you're, in the heart of winter. But depending on where you live, come late February, early March, mid-March, early April, we start getting into spring, winter. And this is a bridge season. It's not full winter, but it's not full spring either, right? So the days are getting longer. And if we pay attention to them, we can start to notice that the light is coming back. We can start to see the signs of spring shooting up out of the ground. So we might see buds on the trees or grasses growing. If you live somewhere snowy, it can be a great time for skiing, where the snow is really good and the sun is shining, or maybe the snow is starting to thaw. This is the time of year that I think people really struggle with, because you have that first warm day and you want to pack up your coat for the rest of the season, but then the next day it's cold again, right? It's this sort of back and forth time of year. And I think calling it spring, winter helps us mentally separate it out and appreciate the signs that are bringing us closer to spring, and also help give us this idea that, oh, it's our last opportunities to hold on to what we like from winter. It's my last time to really go to the sauna a couple more times, or enjoy dinner by candlelight before the sun is setting later again, or enjoy my hot water bottle in my bed before it gets too warm. And so I think this idea of separating out spring, winter, and of doing it based not on a date in the calendar, but wherever you live, you can make your personal designation of, what constitutes the arrival of spring, winter, can help us have some fortitude for sort of the tail end of the season, where we're getting really tired of winter, because we can really start to see, okay, now it's spring, winter, and spring is coming.
That's so much nicer than I think what we have called it in Canada, which is like winter, fall, spring, winter number 2.
Yeah. I call it delusional
it.
Spring, and then still winter.
Spring. Yeah.
But spring, winter is much better, I think. And it's really changed the way I look at that tail end of the season too.
Awesome. Kari Leibowitz, author and psychologist, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today.
It's been so great.
And that was The Big Story. Send us your thoughts on this conversation at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca, or find us on Blue Sky at The Big Story. Be sure to share this episode with a friend or with someone you think may enjoy it. Listen to The Big Story every day on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kaitlin Lee. Thanks for listening.